Okay, so today we'll be discussing how Autodesk and ProModel can help you find ways to increase throughput within your manufacturing processes and workflows. I'm your host, Jason Flores. I'm an industry consultant here at Applied Software. One of my focuses is helping customers understand what a digital factory really means to them and how to leverage technology to not only gather data about the factory, but what we can do with that data to help operations folks make decisions that will affect throughput and efficiencies. Co-hosting with me today is Todd Schmuck, Senior Application Specialist, and Mark Siebert, Senior Consultant. So as I mentioned, this is the second webinar of the ProModel series. One of the challenges I've been tasked with is helping customers understand the complexity of the digital factory. With so many pieces of technology that can be used in creating a truly working digital factory, it can be overwhelming. AutoCAD, factory design utilities, ProModel, raster design, point clouds, Navisworks, 3D scanning, and that's just to name a few. It can really make your head spin. So throughout this series of webinars, we're examining bite-sized pieces and trying to help demystify the world of digital factory as we know it today. It's easier than you think to achieve, and it's more valuable than ever. So have you ever thought about or been tasked with increasing throughput without adding additional personnel or equipment? Where would you even start? How do you measure changes before physically making that change? Today's webinar addresses this challenge and takes you on a journey of two people trying to find ways of increasing throughput using tools like AutoCAD, factory design utilities, and ProModel. So with that, I will turn it over to Todd Schmuck and Mark Siebert, who will kick off today's demonstration of ProModel. As always, feel free to chat any questions you have along the way, and at the end, we can try to answer those questions. Todd?
Thank you, Jason. I'd like to start off with reviewing what we did in our last webinar. So previously, I showed how we could use factory design utilities to do a layout of our process, how we want the material to run through our layout, and does it fit, physically does it fit in the positions that we want. And we used what was called assets. And these assets that you see on the screen, so these blocks, they're just regular AutoCAD blocks in this case. And they've been turned into assets. And assets can be system assets. That means what came out of the box with factory design utilities. But you can also create user assets. So what you're seeing on the screen here are user assets. And you can add properties to these assets. So here's a CNC machine. And as an example, we can add properties that can allow you to adjust the height, the length, the width, and pretty much any property that you need to adjust if there's variables that are in a block that needs to be adjusted. So we did a layout of looking at a CNC machine with one CNC machine layout and one person. And then we did a layout with two. So here is the layout with two. Now this is two machines with one person. These green arrows that you see here, that is related to the ProModel ribbon that is added when you install ProModel. And it allows you to add locations, conveyors, flows, resources. So what you're seeing here is that it's identifying what that flow is of the part as it goes through the process. And with the ProModel suite of tools, you can see that there's a simulation browser, there's a property browser, and then you lay out how the part works through the system. And conveyors are treated special. You can do flows. How does it flow, as I mentioned earlier? How does it flow through? So in this case, it has two machines. If I go back to the one machine scenario, and then I look at the flows that are in here, same thing, but with one machine, of course. And at any point, if you needed to open it up in Autodesk Inventor, because you're doing meetings, you want to see interference, well, over here on the factory ribbon, there's actually a tool open in Inventor. And of course, you get messages like it needs to be saved, it needs to be updated. So that allows it to open up in Inventor. And then at any point, you can take a look at it through Inventor. And if you prefer, you can do the layout in Inventor. I actually prefer doing the layouts in AutoCAD. It's just easy, looking at a top view, looking down, adjusting the models where I need them to be. But as I mentioned earlier, I may want to look at it in Inventor to verify columns and am I going to run into any other issues. And then if you got meetings, you want to look at that. At any point, I can go back to the AutoCAD from the Inventor. I don't really even need to use these tools. I can just go to my task and open them up. So now it's coming in. But one of the reasons you'd want to use the tools is because you've made changes and you want to make sure that the model in Inventor gets updated per whatever you did in the AutoCAD, at least in my workflow, how I do it. So running the simulation, what we did the last time we ran a simulation, we compared the values that we inputted on the flow of how the part was going through there with one machine, and then compare them to what it was with two machines. And then Mark analyzed that for you. So what we're going to look at now are resources. So what if we had one scenario where we decided that we wanted one machine with two people? How would that look? How would the numbers work out on that one? And then the same thing with two machines with two people. And then we can use the data that we captured in our last webinar, and we can evaluate that. Would it be better to have one machine, one person, one machine, two, and the same thing with the two machines? What makes more sense? Ultimately, maybe it's better to have two machines, two people. But we would pretty much just be guessing if we didn't have ProModel. So with ProModel, we're able to adjust that. So what I'm going to do in this one is change the units of the resources to 2. So now I have 2 resources rather than 1. I'll run the simulation. And now you're going to see 2 people moving around. You're going to look at the finished and the reject parts. And at any point, I can speed this up. I can either watch how it goes here as I want, but I could also speed it up. So now when it's done, I can go into look at the results of the simulation. It'll go into the output viewer. And then I can save this data so I can compare it for the next simulation that I want to run. So on the next simulation, I want to look at what would it be if I had 2 machines with 2 people. So I'll do the same thing. I'll just change this to have 2 people, and then I'll run the simulation. Same thing, looking at now with the 2 machines, 2 people, looking at the finish, reject parts. But there's more to analyze here, so I'll speed up the simulation again. And just as a reminder, in the output viewer, there's charts. You can look at the baseline as, different various charts that are available in here, the capacity. And this is where Mark will take this data now, and he will analyze it. And he'll compare it to our last webinar, and then use the same or those results and then compare them to the results we find now to see the best results. 1 machine with 1 person, 2 machines with 1 person, or adding a second resource to it. So at this point, I'll pass it off to Mark.
Thanks, Todd. Now, just to review what our totals were for the last time we got together in the webinar, I'm just going to run a simulation through of just running with 1 machine, 1 person. And if you remember, we were looking at a bottleneck that possibly was in our conveyor belt system. And what we did was we saw that when we look at the labor or the resources of this, we actually find out that we're pushing through in 10 hours. The worker is working 541 hours. He's been used 215 times, but he's only been used 2.44 minutes per average use. So you can get some information here of utilization, which is right around 10%. Now, also with one machine and one person, notice that we had blockage of up to 26%. So with some of this information now, we can start saying, okay, let's look at trying to reduce this blockage by reducing that block container pallet. That's where that's all getting caught up at. So let's run this project with 2 machines and verify our cost. Again, we'll rerun the process. And with this machine, you can still see that there's a bottleneck setting up here, but our machine count should be a little bit higher because the other machine is being used to take up the slack. And as we come in here again, we looked at that one worker had roughly, what is it, about 8% idle time, and the rest of it was either travel time or in use time. In the entity summary, we had 13 items in the system, but 44 exits. Those 44 exits, it took 134 minutes in the process to process that item. And that entity state, notice again, it was blocked up to 31%, even though we had that second CNC machine. Okay? So, what Todd just showed is processing this as 2 workers here doing this process. And what I wanted to show here very quickly is that, let me speed this all the way up, that you're still going to see a little bit of a bottleneck on that conveyor belt. There's no, it's just constant material coming at you. But what you're going to see here is by adding that second person, you're going to see that our resource state actually breaks down to see idle time for cell operator 1 is at 10.81%. Here it's at 11.97%. The amount of items exiting jumped up from 44 to 91. So adding that second labor on made a very big difference. Also notice the average time in the system dropped from 115 down to 59 minutes. Okay? So right here we're showing how just making that small change of adding an extra resource in to help move the products actually is going to increase productivity and make the part more profitable. Now, with this all being said, this can only be seen in a project where you can set it up and run a simulation to it. Now, one of the other things that Todd was mentioning about different variables on his side, we have the same options here when we can do simulations. We can actually set up for simulations to run for the time for a week, calendar dates. We can set up what the run times will be as well as the clock times. Other features that we also have is a scenario manager. And what a scenario manager can do is it can set up multiple ways to see your process to be outputted. So in this case, we can add a scenario to run the baseline, run it with 2 operators in a lathe, run it with 3 operators with a lathe. Okay? We can then run the reports to to run our comparisons to get our delta variables. So we can actually run these different scenarios. So what ProModel has done is it just makes it a very resourceful tool where, as Todd showed you, you can see the 3D objects rolling through the process. And with the data, you can see that we have different graphs and charts that can help us understand how a simple process or even a workflow can change and make the product more profitable. So hopefully today we explained how ProModel can help you design a process, walk it through the process to find out what bottlenecks you might have and different ways that you can explore to make it more profitable. And in this case, adding the second laborer actually helped us increase, actually doubled our output and brought the labor force to where there was a safety factor where they had some downtime in the process. Back to you, Jason.
Thank you, Mark. Great job, guys. Appreciate it. Misty, do we have any questions?
Hey, so I don't see any questions in the chat box. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in there. We can wait just a couple of minutes here. But I do, guys, that was fantastic. I really, really love the content here. And I do also want to thank everybody for joining today and for you guys speaking today. All right, so looks like we don't have any questions in the chat box. So thank you all for joining again. We super appreciate spending time with you, and we trust that it is meaningful and impactful for you and your business. We do look forward to seeing you on future webinars. So thank you so much.
Hey, Misty, before you let them go, just, if anybody wants any more information, you can reach out to me. I do have, I can share my screen, right?
Absolutely.
All right, let's just share that. I believe it's this one. All right, can you see that okay? Misty, can you see that? Well,
we do have a question also that popped in. Yes, I can see it, and then we also have a question that popped in.
All right, good. What's the question?
All right, so Matthias asks, do we have capabilities in this simulation considered variability?
Such as?
Sorry. Do the capacities in the simulation consider variability? There you go.
I'd have to know what sort of variability we're talking about.
Okay, Matthias, if you want to just put in the chat box there what type of variability so we can get you that answer.